Hello and welcome to everyone who's joining our session today on the last day of the 8th World Congress on Conservation Agriculture. So our session today will be addressing the sub-theme of the meetings. It's on soil cover. And we will be having speakers that I am very happy to meet along with you. They are all having a practical background. They are coming from fields, and they are also going to share with us their great knowledge and scientific background. So let's start with Dr. Marie Bartz. Dr. Marie Bartz is a farmer's daughter and a soil biologist, and her research are with the youth on earthworms as indicators for soil quality, biodiversity, and everything that is related to the natural system and agroecosystems. She is a researcher at the Center for Functional Ecology of the Department of Life Sciences of the University of Coimbra and at the Center of Applied Sciences for Organic Farming, both in Portugal, and is part of the board of the Brazilian Federation of No-Tillage System in Brazil also. So please, let's welcome Dr. Marie Bartz and listen to her experience and what she will be presenting. The floor is to Dr. Marie.
Hello, I'm Marie Bartz. I'm soil biologist and researcher at the Center for Functional Ecology of the Coimbra University, and I would like to present you our work perceptions on soil macrofauna in the agriculture field. And to begin, I would like to talk a little bit, give you an introduction about soil biodiversity and the land use management. And the first point is that we have an incredible universe under our feet. 25% of the biodiversity of the world are in our soils. So our soils are considered a high biodiverse environment with an incredible reservoir of life. It's so amazing that if we have a tablespoon full of soil, we have more living organisms in this tablespoon than humans in the entire planet Earth. And this organism's biodiversity is so important that are responsible to support and to sustain our ecosystems acting on the soil chemical and physical process and cyclings. One of the most used classification for the soil organism is the body size, and we have mainly 3 sizes. One are the invisibles. In the invisibles, we have 2 groups, the microorganisms, the fungi and bacteria, and macrofauna with nematodes and protozoas. The middle size that we, of course, need some kind of equipment to see them, the springtails, mites, and potworms. And the organisms, the middle is called mesofauna, and the visibles to our eyes, macrofauna, where we have more than 20 groups, and including spiders, centipedes, earthworms, ants, millipedes, and so everything that we can see in the soil we called as macrofauna. And this group is the group that we will talk in this work. When all these organisms, from the small ones to the big ones, when they are in the soil interacting with each other and with the plants and with other animals in the ecosystems, they form a complex web of ecological activity. This so-called soil food web is influenced by the soil food supply, so the organic matter and plants that we will provide, and by the soil management, so the soil physical disturbance and the input of agrochemicals will impact all this food, all this web constructed by the biodiversity. In this way, the land use intensification using the conventional farming system through the plowing to the monoculture, to the excessive use of pesticides lead to a dramatic decrease of the soil biodiversity, making the system dependent of external inputs. And the opposite, if you use the minimum soil mobilization, the permanent soil cover, the use of crop rotations and cover crops, which characterize our no-till system in Brazil and are the pillars of conservation agriculture in the world, we can enhance soil biodiversity and allowing the system to be more resilient and having more balanced processes. So knowing a little bit about this soil biodiversity, the aim of this study was to evaluate the perception of the soil macrofauna among the farmers and other stakeholders working in agriculture, mainly in Brazil. We organized a questionnaire with 12 questions approaching the interviews profile, the soil organism, and soil system management. And these questionnaires were applied in 2 editions of the Brazilian National No-Tillage Meetings in 2008, held in Londrina, Paraná State, South Brazil, and 2018 in Midwest Brazil, Sorriso, Mato Grosso. I'm presenting you some results regarding the profile of the interviews. 100% of them were from South America. In 2008, 87 participants responded to the questionnaire. From them, 7% were from Paraguay and the rest from Brazil. In 2080, 81 participants answered the questionnaire, and all of them being from Brazil. The region, of course, was related to where the meeting was held. So in 2008, 60% were from South Brazil, and 2080, 81% were from Midwest Brazil. Regarding the profession, the predominance were farmers, more than 30%, and followed by researchers, people working in technical assistance, and other professionals had the highest percentage in the answers. We asked also what was the size of the farm or the land managed, and of course there was a difference considering the years explained by the region, but even despite the region, there were a predominance of the highest percentage of farms with more than 2,001 hectares in both years. So in 2008 was 1/3 of the interviews, and 2018 2/3 of the interviews. And now what we really wanted to know, we gave a list of 9 different organisms for the interviews and asked them which of them they thought would be harmful considered pests. And this was the results. Considered pests, we have 6 groups: the beetles, termites, stink bugs, ants, slugs and snails, and millipedes, with more than 30% of the answers, which 4 of them had a decrease in the answers, and the other 2 groups, the earthworms, spiders, and centipedes, had less than 10%, but all of them had an increase in the answers in 2018. We asked also the interviews if they observed an increase of the pest, and for sure, more than 60 and 70% in both years answered an increase of these pest incidents, and they related this increase to the monoculture as the main, the highest percentage of answers, and the excessive use of pesticides. And then what kind of management was used to control these pests? For both years, the follow, the mechanical and the chemical were the most used protocols, management practices to control pests. But interesting to see that in 2018, alternative integrated pest management and biological that are less harmful to soil biodiversity had a considerable increase through the interviews. And then in the other hand, we get the same list of the 9 organisms and ask the interviews which of them they thought would be beneficial for the croplands. And they listed more than 45% that the airsom breach, more than 90% of the spiders and airsoms were considered beneficial. And 5 other groups had between 10 and 25% considered as beneficial. But 3 of them had a decrease in 2018. And then also asking what kind of management can favor this soil biodiversity. The green manure, the crop rotation, no-tillage system, and keeping native forest or vegetation fragments were important for the soil biodiversity. Although in 2018 we have a decrease in all these answers that were related. We also asked them how they could assess the soil health, and interesting was that most of 80% told that soil organisms were the main point, but many airsoms and soil aggregation also had the highest percentage, but they had a decrease in 2018. And as conclusion of this work, most of the soil macrofauna were not perceived as beneficial. The interviews realized the increase of pest incidents, the decrease in the application of the good practices after 10 years was worrisome, and the importance of the need of foster the capacity building and dissemination of evidence regarding the role and function of soil biodiversity in society is quite important. So already it's important we bring to farmers and to the main society what these organisms do for our environment. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Marie, again for your excellent presentation, where you have been excellently showing that the soil is the most important thing in the nature, and how much it is valuable for all the life on Earth. And what about the microfauna and the microorganism importance and role in playing with the health of the soil and the productivity of the farmers. So you have been conducting this survey and interviews with farmers in Brazil, and definitely the results were like 80% of the farmers saying that the soil health is also on the presence of the microorganism and the soil aggregation. The survey was answered by 30% of the farmers, researchers, following then professionals. So thank you a lot, and we will be also looking at other indicators while distributing the presentations to participants. It was very interesting. So now we will be moving to the second presentation. It will be presented by Marie-Thérèse Gässler, and I am sure that most of us know her father. She is a farmer and a consultant in conservation agriculture in France, and she was also working with her father, Alfred, who is one of the pioneers in conservation agriculture in France. So the floor is yours, Marie-Thérèse.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me today. So I'm going to talk to you about our work, my father and mine. I called it From Farmer to Farmer because we are farmers and we try to work with other farmers to improve practices, and especially I will focus today on the need to improve the way we monitor the changes in soil and plant health under conservation agriculture. So a quick introduction. I work with my father, Alfred. He's a German farmer. He came to France about 30 years ago, started to sell some sewing machines for no-till. And he soon started to be consultant and to give courses to farmers who wanted to use no-till and especially conservation agriculture, so no-till and cover crops. And today we are really focusing on that part, the consultant part. So I joined him about 5 years ago. And now we also propose a lot of soil analysis, biology and chemicals, and also plant analysis for farmers who want to check what they are doing. So quickly, our goal as a farmer is to improve our management to get healthy plants for and with healthy soils for healthy food. So we try to find new techniques. We get inspired from farmers all around the world, thanks to networking and internet, but also from scientists and specialists like Kinsey, Albrecht, Kristen Jones, John Kempf, Pfeiffer, Ellen Ingham, or Don Rukowski, who is really great. So this way we have like a double competency in science and in agricultural systems. So theory and practice that we try to conciliate. We know the soil has been depleted with our way of farming, the tillage, the plowing, the chemicals, and intensive production. And this was because the focus always was on quantity rather than quality. And this has to change, and this is changing. But we need tools to monitor the changes. We have the big principles that we want to follow: no-till, always living plants, and diversity. And everyone has to find a way to apply it to its own farm environment and conditions, because every situation and every farm is different. Farming is an entire system that is influenced from the environment. So what is working out 1 year for one farmer isn't necessarily working out for his neighbor or for another year. Therefore, it is more than essential that every farmer and producer checks his impact on his own soils and productions. And we, my father and I, we try to give the farmers those tools from farmer to farmer. So we try it out on our own farm, and we work with a lot of other people. So how we monitor it, we use analysis. That's the best way to see what is really going on. Some are pretty well known, like chemical analysis. For that, we essentially use the Kinsey-Albrecht analysis, who is focusing on the chemical balance. We also use plant analysis to ensure the plant gets the nutrients it needs for its immunity and its growth. So in the last few years, we have highlighted the need to change our soil management and to take more into account the soil biology. And therefore, we are using a tool that has yet to be more disseminated, the soil chromatography. It gives a lot of information about the quality of the soil biology. And this one, we try a lot to combine with the microscope analysis, who will give some more information, especially when we use compost and biological inputs. And where it gets really interesting is when we try to really combine these different analyses, and that's work we have been done with the long time trial of Oberacker in Switzerland, where we compare different practices on soil, soil chemical and soil biology analysis to look if we can link some things together. So that's where it gets really interesting. So to explain a little bit, the aim of the soil chromatography is to estimate the quality of the soil biology. So it gives information about the oxygen level, the bacterial activity and the fungal activity, and also a little bit of the soil evolution, which is very interesting. So it is really a qualitative assessment, and it has been really developed in the early 50s with Pfeiffer, so it's been a long time ago, and then by the Lübke family, who is now dispensing the courses. And since then, as the last few years, some studies have been carried out about this, some consolidating this method and some don't. So we try now at our farm on other fields like Oberacker to compare the results to analysis with microscope and chemical analysis to look what it really shows or not. But we can say it gives a lot of information, and we see it every year on our own farm already. So quickly about the reading, we will look at the color, the structures, the different areas, and the evolution between two different paper kinds. So it gives a lot of information, and it's kind of easy to read, even if you don't really know how to do it. And then it gets really interesting when you know how to read it and to look really in the details of it. So very quickly, if you want to have a check, this is a stone, so it has no life. We see there's no structure, and this is a pasture, so it's biologically active, sorry. So if you look at both of them, even if you don't know what to look at, you know that the right one is more pretty to look at and there's more structure, so more life. So that's where it gets interesting. You can compare different practices. Here the samples used were taken on a trial. So the 3 samples are on the same field where different soil management were tried out. So same field, same rotation, same cover crops when cover crops are used. It did go on about 7 years, and then we compared the soil biology evolution, or how the soil biology was in the different soil management. And there, even without knowing how to read the picture, you can guess the best one is the no-till with cover crop. So the way of farming matters, and it is very important to assess it. As I said it earlier, we know the concept, but we know we have to put life back into our soil, but we have to learn how to do it and where what works. So we have to be able to check the biology in our soils, and especially if it works. As a farmer, I don't really know what to do with a biomass. If you give me a microbial biomass, I don't know what to do with it. But if I know that my soil biology is working or not working, then I have really an information on the impact of my practices on soil biology and therefore on soil function. And in fact, thinking that what you are doing is the right thing to do isn't enough. We did our first chromatography 7 years ago, so we had around 50 years of conservation agriculture. And it was the beginning of it. We didn't know all the techniques, what was good or what was wrong. But we have 15 years of conservation agriculture, and it was really bad. And 3 years later, we did improve the practices, and we saw that we had a really better soil biology. So what did change is that we tried to really have permanent soil cover crops, diversity, and really no-till always. So that's why we are all here today. So, and now we try really to spread out this knowledge to other farmers by using courses, doing field trips, and other things. So in conclusions, what I try to say is that we really need to reduce the gap between scientific trials and farmer fields, because we need practices, or we need techniques that we can use on our fields. And we really need to link together chemical, physical, and biological soil analysis to assess what we are doing on our soils to have better soils, better crops, and better food. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie-Thérèse. That was really interesting, because practicing the conservation agriculture in the field with farmers has been always challenging. It's definitely context specific, and it has to be monitored, as you were saying, as you did with your father in the field over these years, to prove that conservation agriculture practices are improving the chemical, physical, and also the biological indicators of the whole agriculture practice. So as you were saying, it was linking the theory to practice and bringing all the tools and all the analysis that could be proving to the farmers on the field in the practice by looking and having the analysis of the soil. So thank you again for this. It was really interesting. And now we will be moving to our third speaker, Harun Cicek. He is a research and development worker. I'm sorry if I'm saying he has been working on research and development, and his focus was on sustainable crop and agroforestry production in dry lands of Central Asia, Middle East, North and West Africa. So welcome again, and please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Faten. You can hear me, I hope? Good.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. So today, thank you very much for everyone listening. Today, I will not talk about results, but I will just introduce a new project that started just a year ago, and we're completing our first season, basically. So we call this project Conserve Terra. It's and I'm just gonna start with the rationale why this project came about, rather than right away introducing the partners and all that. So the general idea. Which slide are you seeing now? Sorry, So as we all know that conservation agriculture really works well in the dry areas, especially. So this is kind of very well established fact now. There's really widespread consensus that we know that conservation agriculture works in many places, but it really performs really well in dry areas. This has been shown through several studies, meta-analysis. But at the same time, we know that in the dry areas of, for example, Mediterranean, that is not really widely adapted. Those from Mediterranean would know this, and this is really a paradox because many people have been working on conservation agriculture in both South and North Mediterranean, but for the last 30, 40 years, let's say. But unfortunately, adaptation hasn't been really as fast as we would imagine or we would like. This was the exact question that Prima Foundation asked. As some of you may know, Prima is the kind of Horizon 2020 equivalent for Mediterranean region. So they were asking basically why the conservation agriculture is not adapted in Mediterranean area, considering all the benefits. So they asked for proposals to tackle this issue, and we gave our proposal. For some reason, okay, the thing is changing. So basically, our idea, of course, started with general understanding that there are many barriers that has been cited in the literature. Some of them are lack of sufficient biomass, lack of access to critical CA inputs, for example. High cost of inputs, government subsidies favoring weed pressure, necessary of tillage in the absence of expensive herbicides, limited or no inclusion of legumes and rotational crops, unavailable or expensive legume or forage seeds, lack of functional outputs markets for the rotational crops, especially for forages. I mean, these are all, in a way, people have been working on this, and these are listed in the literature very much. And one of the probably most, especially in the southern Mediterranean, one of the things that really strikes most researchers is this extreme stubble grazing with sheep. This is kind of tragedy of the commons in southern Mediterranean, especially that you really don't have so much biomass left after the harvest, unfortunately. So, but when you look at the north, this grazing pressure is not that much, and also you have all the tools available, not like the south, let's say, southern Mediterranean. So in the north, in Italy, in Spain, in France, in Turkey, right? You have the tools, the seeders are there. You have, you have all the inputs, maybe sometimes even subsidies or support from the government. But at the same time, in Mediterranean, you have this land size conundrum that, that in Mediterranean, you don't have this small land that people have in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, let's say, that can be managed by labor. And you don't have this large areas, large lands that in Americas and Australia that can be managed by machine and the farmers can afford to buy the machine, right? And so it's the Mediterranean is kind of in the middle, and it just presents this difficulty that the farmers are not able to buy expensive machinery, and then yet they cannot actually manage their land by hiring labor, right? Especially the weed management, you can imagine. So. And also there are a lot of differences between Mediterranean and the New World where conservation agriculture is very widespread. For example, in Mediterranean, you have smallholder, low input and resource poor farmers, especially in the south. And the New World, you have this large scale, high input agricultural practices. And also the cultural wise, you have rooted traditions, conservative approach to new concepts. In the New World, you have this diversity of immigrants who are open to new ideas. So a very different context when you think about it. So also we thought about the mental models, like in what does tillage or soil disturbance signify for people? When you talk to regular farmers, tillage is not really a soil management. It signifies many other things: control or ownership, aesthetics, hard work, aerating the soil, controlling weeds, nutrient mineralization, right? So they have different perspectives on tillage and soil. So we wanted to really identify what are these things through mental models. So why do they till, right? Do they till to some of the very limited research on this qualitative research shows that farmers till to control the spread of shrubs, eliminate the competition for nutrients and water by weeds, and then maintain a clean land. So they don't see really the tillage as something that degrades their soil, right? So this is kind of general understanding of farmers. And also, is there basic soil literacy? Do they really understand soil as a living entity? So do they see soil degradation as a threat to their livelihood? Right? We wanted to really tackle these questions. We wanted to talk to and have a dialogue with the farmers. So that is in a way we put together the project based on these constraints that we see. So at the end, basically, our objective is facilitate wider acceptance and adoption of CA principles in the Mediterranean region by tackling mental, cultural, and contextual realities surrounding farmer soil management decisions. And we have partners as Morocco, Tunisia, Spain, and Turkey field activities, and Germany is the coordinating country. So I'm going fast. So this is the list of the partners that most of them you probably know already. These are the usual suspects in every country that you're familiar with probably. So in a nutshell, you can look at a project like this. So we have this pragmatic application of CA principles, let's say strategic tillage or pulses and forage legumes or crop livestock integrated conservation. So we have biophysical activities under these, right? And then we have this mental models and soil literacy and dissemination. We have here mental models and social determinants of soil management. We are doing extensive surveys in 3 countries. And then we have farmer field schools and soil literacy, trying to improve the understanding of soil. Farmer field schools are usually, as you may know, are really geared towards crop management, but we really put focus on soil this in farmer field schools. So basically 2 big components, one social or literal component, and then 1 technical component, let's say, and total 7 work packages. So at the end of the day, we want to take it a little bit more less strict attitude towards conservation agriculture, let's say. So instead of having this zero tillage, we were asking, is strategic tillage okay sometimes? Because this has been practiced in Australia, as you may know, by some farmers. And, is instead of full soil cover, is it okay to have optimal soil stubble grazing and have, some kind of balance, share this stubble biomass resource between the animals and the soil? So what is the best way to manage this? So And diverse rotations, of course, we cannot really we cannot give way there. We have to have that. And the foundation of this is, I think, is the soil literacy, that we need to really work on this. Whatever project we have, we need to really work with farmers to increase their appreciation of soil. Yeah, so you can follow us on this social platforms or YouTube. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, because this is really what we exactly need in our region, in the Mediterranean. Conservation agriculture has been longly introduced in the Mediterranean with a lot of questions, a lot of barriers, like you were just mentioning, on the mental, cultural, contextual, and everything that is. As we were just discussing before, to show the value out of it, which is, I can summarize, having the soil literacy. The soil literacy, as you were mentioning, is very important. So we can't wait to see the results in 2024, so that we can have more practical solutions for the farmers and for all the stakeholders who are encouraging, promoting, or investing in conservation agriculture in the Mediterranean region. So thank you again. And now we will be moving to Annelene Swanepoel. She's from South Africa, and she grew up on a research farm. She studied also at universities of Stellenbosch and Pretoria in botany and genetics. So linking the research farm and the studies, she has started working as pasture breeder, soon thereafter as rangeland scientist, and she has been, for the last 20 years, the scientific manager of plant sciences with the Western Cape Department of Agriculture. So let's all see and listen to Anne. Please, Anne, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Our Conservation Agriculture Research Program is today one of the game-changing initiatives in our province. What started out as a long-term multidisciplinary crop rotation trial in 1996 has led to the development of a small grain industry norm and practice, with our farmers being competitive, resource smart, and climate smart. Now, this is the broad outline of the presentation, showing all aspects that form part of this development process. On the right-hand side, you'll see the building blocks that form the development of CA in the Western Cape Province. Now, the aim of the long-term trial was to determine the short and long-term effects of 8 crop and crop pasture rotation systems on a range of aspects. Capacity building was done through various component research projects involving a range of researchers and technical advisors. 2 economic impact studies were also done on the impact of the long-term trial. Now, the initial aim was to focus on weed and disease management, and CA was only fully adopted later on in the trial. Future risks were identified that were expected with climate change and would impact on the sector. Technology transfers started out in the beginning with the usual research reports, but expanded soon to include more and more stakeholders. The Swartland region is one of the most important areas for wheat production in South Africa and is a winter rainfall area. The experimental area was 50 hectares with 48 randomized plots, and each crop sequence or rotation system had 2 replications. Plot sizes varied from half a hectare to 2 hectares. Now, there were 8 systems, 4 cash crop and 4 cash crop pasture systems. You can see the various sequences of wheat, canola, lupins, with pastures of medics and medic clovers, with one system incidentally having a small area of saltbush adjacent to the system that proved to be quite important, as the saltbush could be grazed at the start of the season, allowing the medics to establish well before grazing. Protocols were agreed upon by a technical committee prior to each season, and all activities on the trials were recorded in detail. Masses of data were collected on a lot of aspects, as you can see at the bottom there. Capacity building happened steadily all along. Component trials were allocated to postgrad students and other researchers from outside, with our project leaders as study leaders, mentors, and collaborators. This enabled us to do research where we did not have the capacity in specific disciplines. Funding was done internally and also through funding applications to industry partners, and students were funded with bursaries. In 2013, an impact assessment was done on the role researchers played in CA adoption in the Western Cape, and it focused on the shift from monoculture cropping to crop rotation in the Swartland, sustainability of the systems, the effect that research had on the adoption rate of CA, and more. In 2015, a monitoring and evaluation study was commissioned with the aim to study the impact of the long-term trial on the greater Swartland region, and they focused on the effects on crop yield, weed control, disease suppression, soil production, and economically sustainable land use. So CA developed after the trial was started initially as a crop rotation trial with minimum tillage, and in 2001, Zero Till started with the retaining of crop residues and grazing the pasture phases during the dry summer. In 2010, CA principles were fully incorporated into the trial, and in 2011, the Conservation Agriculture Western Cape Association was established, with the project leader of the trial being the initiator and secretary. Now, the trial was an integral part of the case study during the development of a climate change response implementation plan for our province at regional level between scientists, farmers, and agribusinesses in the grain industry. So technology transfer progressed from reports to a host of stakeholders, local and from abroad, to visit the trial. And the most interactive and valuable events for us were the green and brown tours. Those are walk and talks in the growing season, as well as in the dry season, when we focus on what's happening in the soil. A wide array of stakeholders were involved, and they all became our PR people for the trial and for CA eventually. So as mentioned, a huge amount of data was generated and is to this day in high demand from researchers everywhere. It's also part of the GLT at Rothamsted. I will share some of the most important information as a summary of results. Top left, we have the average yield increase over monoculture wheat, showing the increase as a percentage. The result is an increase of up to 38% in rotational cropping above the monoculture wheat. The bigger increases are essentially in the cropping systems containing the pastures. The top right-hand side, we have the average wheat yield per crop sequence in kilograms per hectare. And we see that where wheat followed on wheat, the yield decreased, while if wheat followed on a legume as part of the pasture phases, the wheat yield increased. Bottom left, we have the gross margins of the systems as for an 800-hectare farm, and we have ranked those for each system for cropping or cropping sequence. We see that wheat monoculture had the worst gross margin, with systems where wheat followed on wheat doing quite bad. Systems where legumes are incorporated did better, and the best gross margin was seen where we included legume pastures into the systems. So bottom right, we took then the gross margin for an 800-hectare farm, and we calculated the difference between the rotation system and the monoculture wheat gross margins, and then we depicted the rotation system as a percentage improvement over the wheat monoculture. And we see that all systems improved markedly on the gross margin of wheat monoculture, with improvements ranging from 23%, where we saw a lupin, canola, wheat rotation, up to 68%, where we had a mediclover pasture wheat rotation. Now, the proof of the pudding, so to speak, was in carbon, as this is where we needed to make a huge difference in order to move forward. Carbon percentage in the soil was recorded since 2001, and we saw that it's increased across the range, with the pasture cropping system showing a higher improvement over cash cropping systems. Another important result for us was that the trial led to the development of an extensive research program consisting of several long-term research projects incorporating CA principles. The capacity building for the duration of this trial seems like a very humble beginning, and the numbers are shown here. But spin-offs afterwards was a huge interest from local and foreign researchers, and it still continues today. Several accolades were won, and the last award there is showing that the impact that this trial had on the economy of the region was substantial. So the impact study on the role of research on CA adoption showed that adoption grew tremendously in 10 years' time. As you can see, it showed that most farmers saw a positive response with CA, and the cost benefit at that stage for the Western Cape province was around 340 million rands. Another study on the impact of the long-term trial showed that almost all farmers do crop rotation. They said that crop rotation had a positive effect on their crop yield, soil, production cost, farm income, weed control, lowering the weed seed bank, and a decrease in mechanization cost. They also had several requests regarding our research, which we subsequently complied with. So results from the trial drove our entire CA campaign. The trial's no and zero-till practices showed lower inputs and more stable wheat production. Productivity and soil health were improved through increased soil moisture retention and microorganisms and decreased soil temperature and soil compaction. The strong research basis led to the development of an extensive research program on CA practices and CA systems for the sector, which with the establishment of the Association Conservation Agriculture Western Cape in 2011. The entire research program formed part of a case study for the Western Cape Smart Agri Plan. The positive trial results meant that more and more farmers converted to CA. The trial was a case study for the Provincial Climate Change Response Implementation Plan for the agricultural sector, and it was identified as one of 6 priority projects to fast-track climate change resilience in the province. And you see, the outputs from the trial were very impressive for actually a very small research team. In conclusion, we saw how starting out with a long-term crop rotation trial turned into a showcase for conservation agriculture, and it led to climate change resilience for our small grain production systems. We started out with conventional tillage and monoculture wheat, using herbicides heavily in the beginning, and this caused soil degradation, carbon and nutrient depletion, and it was uneconomical for farmers and ecologically also not viable. We introduced zero-till and crop rotation, and through applying the CA principles, we saw soil health improving, carbon and nutrient levels improving, grain production became sustainable, also economically so, and the systems became ecologically viable. CA resulted in climate resilience for our farmers, with potentially decreasing the impact of climate change. CA improved soil water retention and soil fertility. On top of that, our research capacity increased and our knowledge base and technology transfer expanded tremendously. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. That was, again, an interesting presentation, especially when you were presenting about the linkages between the conservation agriculture, the crop rotation, the no-till, and the climate change impacts, and how it can be improving the soil quality, the soil health, the water retention, and all the benefit of the CA and the crop rotation in grain industries that we could have. So that was an interesting presentation, also presenting on the facts and the practices on field, and how you will be, you were also having the capacity building and knowledge transfer that was coming out of the practices, and last, to assess the impact of the practices on the soil. So that was really interesting. Again, thank you. We will be moving now to our speaker, Stéphane Cordeau. He is a research scientist at INRA, France, in the agroecology lab. He leads researches on the impact of cropping system on weed communities and their biological regulation. The practical objective of his research is to design biodiversity-based cropping system that reduce herbicide use by the implementation of no-till and cover crop, and also to assess system sustainability.
Hi everyone, my name is Stéphane Cordeau. I'm an agronomist, a researcher at INRA in France, and I will present you today what we are doing in Dijon in eastern France on the CA-SYS platform, which is a platform experimenting a biodiversity-based pesticide-free system, including conservation agriculture. So the objective of the platform is to design and test the feasibility and performances of pesticide-free agriculture using crop and wild biodiversity in support for crop production, what we call biodiversity-based agriculture. So we design system with different strategy, but all of them try to manage the pests without pesticides, using crop rotation, soil coverage, a lot of variety mixture and crop mixture also. We want to enhance the biological regulation with beneficial insects and try to increase the tolerance to biotic and abiotic stresses. We want to ensure the long-term economic profitability, so we introduce some profitable crops in the systems and try also to decrease the production cost. We would like also to ensure some good environmental performances. That's why we use no pesticide, use high rates of legume in the crop rotation, try also to decrease the use of irrigation. And we would like to increase and maximize the energetic efficiency. That means to decrease to increase the products and decrease the costs. We have the idea that we would like to design this system with many farmers to ensure that this system would be very interesting for the farmers and us take the risk to experiment in the CA-SYS platform. So we organize a lot of workshop and discussion with the farmers to design all the farming practices and the idea in the platforms. So basically, we are testing 4 pesticide cropping systems. One of this system is in conservation agriculture. It's called SD1. It's a permanent notice system using cover crops in a diversified cropping rotation. The second system, SD2, is close to this one, but we allow the use of superficial tillage to manage the weeds before establishing the crops. And the 2 other systems that I will not speak to you today are tillage-based system and particularly plowing. So the conservation agriculture system is a 6-year crop rotation, including all seed rape, intercrop with companion cover crops, winter wheat, winter barley, a secondary crop, which is buckwheat, and then we implemented a cover crops, and then a soybean, an intercropping of winter wheat and winter faba bean, a cover crop, and spring and intercropping of spring barley and spring pea. So there is a lot of cover crop in all the summer fallow periods, and we use a lot of different crops to be harvested and sold to the cooperatives. The second system, the SD2, is a non-permanent system. The crop rotation is a bit different, particularly in the beginning of the crop rotation. The second transformation we applied on the CA-SYS platform is completely change the landscape structure, so the field shape and size. We implemented some semi-natural habitats around the fields to enhance the biological regulation. And we also think about what we call the landscape composition of farming practices. So where are the farming practices located to try to enhance the biological regulation of pests? So we established in 2018, at the beginning of the CA-SYS platform, flower strips, grass strips, and hedges around the fields to ensure permanent habitat and resources for beneficial insects, and try to see over the long term if these insects can regulate the pest of the crops. This is why the CA-SYS platform is an agroecological system experiment, because we designed the cropping system, but also the semi-natural habitats in coherence with what we do in the fields. And so the addition of the cropping system with the semi-natural habitat is a system, and we experiment both as a system experiment. And we also assess from the economic point of view, both type of habitats. So basically, the CA-SYS platform is a 125 hectares experiment established since the summer of 2018. So it's 49 fields where we establish 4 different cropping systems and organized as a free agroecological system. So a CA zone, it's a zone where all the fields are cultivated with CA systems, a tillage zone where all the fields are cultivated with tillage-based systems, and a mixed zone where some of the fields are cultivated with conservation agriculture principles, and some of them are tillage-based systems. So to assess the performance of these systems, we record a lot of stuffs: the pest, the damage, the weed, the yield losses due to the weeds. We assess the yield and the quality. We record all the farming practices also in order to assess the economic performances. We collect some soil to assess the microbial diversity, the carbon stocks, and the emission of N2O. And also we assess the pollinators to see if they are enhanced with these practices. So at the beginning of the experiment, we assess the baseline of the soil by collecting 504 points with a grid, a long grid. And with this soil, we assess many criteria: the microbial diversity, the weed seed bank, etc. And we will redo the same many years to assess the evolution of this criteria. We also compare the performances of the system regarding the performances of the system of the farmer around. So we collect some data in farmer fields around the experimental platforms. So basically, the CA-SYS platform is an agroecological system experiment, an open field farming without livestock. We could co-design this system with the farmers and extension workers with a high density of semi-natural habitats. There is a lot of different types of experiment in the CA-SYS platform: analytical, systemic experiment, and landscape experiment. And it is a collaborative open platform to test pesticide-free system. Some of the systems are conducted under conservation agriculture. So I thank you for your attention and keep you posted if you want some information on the Twitter account, on the website, but there is also a YouTube channel if you want to see some video of the platform. Thank you so much.
Again, thank you, Stéphane, for this interesting presentation about the platform. The platform CA-SYS is an agroecological system platform, and as you were just describing, it's over 6 years, and it's useful to show the interlinkages between the conservation practices and the biodiversity conservation. You have been presenting the pesticide use and its impact. You have been also presenting the planting of natural plants around the fields that are part of the CA-SYS platform. So that was really interesting, having this experiment over a large area of 125 hectares. So it's finally, the conclusion are really interesting because it's showing the multidisciplinary research linkages on CA importance. So again, I'm very happy to have all our great speakers, Stéphane, Marie, Annelene, and also again Marie Bartz, Dr. Marie Bartz, and Cicek, who just left us. I am sure that we have questions, and we will be addressing those questions to you from the participants. Aziz was collecting the questions. Let's see more about this. I am having a difficulty to reach the questions. Okay, I apologize. So there is a question to Dr. Marie Bartz. Couldn't the decrease in beneficial practices be mainly the results of the regional difference in farm structure and the scale between assessment years?
Okay, thank you. Adada, for the question. In fact, yes and no, because we have 10 years difference among the two times that we do this questionnaire. Of course, there's a huge difference between the regions, from the size and from also the managing. But in 10 years, we hope that farmers, at least in Brazil, as we are quite active in the no-tillage system, that they have a better idea about the good practices. So in one way, yes, but in other way, we was a little bit disappointed because even the Cerrado region is a region with great properties. We were hoping that there were a percentage of beneficial practices in the region. In fact, at least the biological management was really improved, and the others, like the native forest fragments, that's a rule in whole Brazil that you need to keep, and it's not known from the farmers that these fragments, this native vegetation, are important for our biodiversity. So it's some things that we can think and issues that we can work with the farmers now.
Thank you. I hope that this answer is quite satisfying to our participants. So there is a note to Anne. In addition to measuring weed control, please consider also measuring or estimating weed seed production. It is the best measure for the success or failure of a crop production system. Would you like to add or comment on this?
Yes, we are doing wheat seed banks. We have done wheat seed bank studies on that. Would that cover the question? I'm not exactly sure what she means. But we have done wheat seed bank studies where we take soil cores and we see what weeds are emerging and so on. So I don't know if that would answer her question.
I guess you did already presented your answer. Let's see if the more question will be coming to you. So we have another question to Stéphane. What are the challenges and barriers farmers could face if they want to adopt CA and free pesticide compared to conventional?
Yeah, that's a good question, but I think that first we have to say that no one in France and probably in Europe and probably in the world know how to do CA system without pesticides. So this is the first barrier. I think that we are currently experimenting very innovative systems, and I think before thinking about adopting this kind of system, we have to think about the cropping system, the crop rotation. And the first result, also to answer one of the questions, we can see during the first year that there is a lot of change in the fields, particularly dealing with the weed management. And this is the first and the main barrier we are observing. Particularly, we all mainly think about managing the perennial weeds, but when we think about no-till pesticide-free systems, the main issue is the crop volunteers. So you have to rethink completely your crop rotation, comparing to what you have done in the past, and particularly comparing to what the farmers are doing currently in the landscapes. And also, I would say that what we are doing in Dijon, which is in eastern France, is only applicable around the experimental platform. There is no way that we will say at the end of the experiment or in 10 years that what we demonstrated here is applicable everywhere. So I would say that this is a platform where we learn something, where we visit and discuss with the farmer. And after we'll see how we can learn something to move forward with the farmer on their farms to change their systems.
Thank you. We have also one question to Marie-Thérèse. Would you tell a little bit more about the biological testing methods and how they relate to the loss of the loss on ignition, and on the soil organic matter?
Yes, so the method we use to look at the biological life in soil is the chromatography. So it's kind of interesting because it really shows us how the biology is working in the soil or not working in many cases. So when we look at the relation between the biology we see on the chromatography and the SOM content, sometimes we see that soils with a high organic matter content can have a very poor biological activity, which can explain why soils with high organic matter don't work out as well as they should. So that's how it can be interesting to look at both of them. But it's really, the method we use is really about how the activity is working or not working. So sometimes we can see, for example, if you want to relate it to the organic matter, we can see that it has problems digesting the organic matter and that there is a lot of raw material still in the soil and not used to create humus, who is actually really important in the soil. I hope it answers the question.
Thank you. I have two questions to Stéphane. Before grouping them, I would like to give this question to Dr. Bartz. Why do people think spiders are not beneficial or even harmful?
It's hard to say because we don't ask why, né? And that's really strange because I talk at the time that I was in Brazil a lot with farmers, and really they have a strong view about the soil microorganism, né? Because many times that I was in the field, so the earthworm are universally the best bioindicators, né? But when I'm telling and asking about other macroorganisms, né? They say, no, I see a lot of them. And then I say, what did you do when you saw see all these organisms? Apply pesticides. So independent. So I heard it from a lot of farmers. So it's something from us, from the scientific, from the academics, to bring this information and to show to them how important is and how is the functioning of this food web in all the environment, not only in the soil, but in the whole, above and below ground. That they have the idea and to know that's important, all of them in the system. So that's the point of the question, I think.
Thank you. Thank you again. So, Stéphane, I have two questions to you. The first one, are there already first results available comparing the baseline assessment versus the first or second year after switching to CA? And in particular, did the weed, insect, pest pressure, and species change? So this is the first question. Over to you.
Yes, thank you. So like I told in my presentation, we have two ways to assess the cropping system. The first way is to compare the results we observe in the field currently and year after year compared to the baseline, which is the initial state, but also compare to the farmers who are around us and and farming in the same production situation. This is very important because many farmers, when they visit the CA-SYS platform, told us what was the initial state. Was it weedy or not weedy? And this is very important to know the initial state before changing your farming practices. But secondly, we know that the insects, the pests, the weeds change year after year, and because of the climate. And we need to know if the change we observe in the CA-SYS platform are the same or different than the one the farmer observed in their fields. So what we can say about this first year is indeed there is a lot of change during the first 3 years, particularly about the weed. But what we can see in the farmers' field around is that it's quite the same currently. These 2-3 years were very weedy. The climate is not very dry, and we have a lot of weeds, and some of the main crops around are quite difficult to conduct, particularly oilseed rape. There is a lot of insects, and farmers around have the same difficulty that we have in pesticide-free context. But I would say that the main difference is that probably we had some difficulty to conduct the crop until the end for some crops, particularly the mustard and the oilseed rape, which are very difficult to conduct in pesticide-free systems, particularly because of the insects and because of the weeds.
Great, thank you. We have already went beyond the time, but still there is a quick question to you also, Stéphane. Please, if you can quickly answer. Are you including measures to increase weed seed predation?
Yeah, obviously, because the CA-SYS platform it's a biodiversity-based experimental platform. That means we want to use the wild diversity to regulate the pest. So we implemented 10% of the area in semi-natural habitat, flower strips, grass strips, and also the no-till system and the no use of pesticide is a way to enhance the beneficial insects. And we'll assess it over the years to see if this insect obviously regulates the weeds, the insects, the aphids, etc.
Great, thank you. So we will be closing now the session. Thank you again for everyone for your great interventions, and looking forward meeting you again. So participants, please note that there will be a break before the general closing session. It was supposed to be 10 minutes if we were closing by 4:55. So you do your calculation and then you join the general session. Thank you again. Okay. Thank you again. So it's still, you have a 10 minutes break before the general closing. See you there.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.